We don't necessarily have free will. We are being shaped and put on a path by the laws of nature that are around us.
Well, we're certainly influenced by all those things that are around us. Influences that are coming at us all the time. Yeah. And our inner environment is influenced by the food we eat, the water we drink, and
Yes. Oh, I
and all
definitely agree
those
with you, yeah.
all those are filled with toxins.
Oh, yes.
The water filled with toxins, and I don't know what people do about that. Right?
What water do you prefer drinking?
I distill my water.
But still tap water, or do you distill bottled water?
I distill tap water because bottled water has the same problem. There's something like 63% of it are actually have got BPA or PFAS or all those sort of chemicals in it.
Yes.
So I don't know if there's any solution to this because it's worldwide. And the worst polluter, cars. Cars produce 80% of the microplastic problem.
Microplastic.
That's what it is, microplastic.
Do you think that growing our food is a solution to that, or because that's a bit of a nightmare, isn't it? Although I do think that would be very
eat
helpful.
organic, right?
Yeah, same.
But only less than 1% of people eat organic in the country.
Yeah, because even organic, like, how do you really know if it's organic or not? Do you see it?
That's the problem.
Yeah.
You don't actually.
Are you somebody that has maybe a cottage in the countryside? Do you go there every now and then, just reset your system and the likes, or?
No, well, I live on the periphery, if you like. I live out near Wimbledon. Do you know
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
That's a nice area, yeah.
It's quite nice, yeah. And so there's a little bit more of nature around there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what about your kind of understanding of the metaphysical? Do you believe that there is an intelligent being that created everything, or do you believe we came by chance, or?
I think that the answer lies within, and that the whatever we're seeking is already within us. The child is happy as it is naturally, right? And then the adult gets so confused by all the conversations that it's having. By the time they're adults, they're confused like you couldn't imagine.
Yeah.
So they are then trying to find happiness outside.
I agree.
Wrong place, wrong
Wow.
direction, inside. Absolutely.
You're spitting some bars today, sir.
Pardon?
You're spitting some bars today, sir. It's true. I mean, I think it's an Arabic couplet that says, "Wafi," or we believe that the Quran tells us as well, "Wafi anfusikum," that look inside you, and when you look inside you, then you will see, and things will make more sense. That's why God. Afala tubsirun, it tells us to meditate and look at creation, and it's through meditation and looking at creation that we will see and realize that there are certain fundamental truths, certain innate truths. That's why Justin Barrett did a study of Oxford University, and he looked at, I think, 20 countries over 3 years, 40 studies, and he concluded that we are all born with an innate disposition to believe in a quote-unquote God. And you've got other people like Olivera Petrovich who say the same thing. So you're absolutely right. And different people have put different things on, even if you ask AI today, that if you look at this vibrated, bro, that according just to the Bible, if you take the church fathers out of it, just by taking the Bible, if you were to conclude if Jesus, what would you conclude Jesus to be? And give like a one-word answer or 1 or 2 word answer. It said a prophet.
The one reference I'd make to the Bible is, "Be still and know that I am God." So the problem is being still. What does that mean? So that's really, I think, at the heart of the matter.
Yeah, you're right, because even if you take the analogy of water, you can't see what's at the bottom of that water if the water is agitated. Once you wait for it to be still, then the answer becomes clear. I got that from Kung Fu Panda, by the way. There's a really good scene in there, which obviously uses Oriental wisdom,
Yeah.
and being still is something very and integrally important.
Challenging.
Yeah,
Very
but out of interest, like your view about God, do you believe God is a singular? Do you believe him or it to be plural?
As I said at the beginning, what is in modern terminology is referred to as the unconscious is what rules our lives, right? And we're set up in a certain way to receive incoming information in a certain pattern, right? And that pattern is embedded in us, and then we act out that pattern, and later in life. We lose all sight of our inner world because the outer world is so pressing on us. With the way the child is educated, all sorts of things, all sorts of influences. The food, the water, everything.
But I think modern science has now modern science and modern psychology tells us that there's something called neuroplasticity, that the brain is constantly changing, morphing based upon our nurture. Even the cells in our body, the DNA, which is influenced by the activity. Like if you look at the typical view of evolution, the neo-Darwinist view, they believe from DNA to RNA to proteins, it's one direction. However, now we know from the likes of Dennis Noble, who've looked into this, and many studies that have gone into this, that trauma can be inherited. If a organism is given heat, extreme heat, and it produces resistance against that heat, their offspring now will be born with that resistance. In other words, the external can affect the DNA as well. So you've raised an interesting point, which is the nature versus nurture debate. And now I think modern science it's good to see it giving more credence and more, accepting the fact that nurture does play an as integral part as the nature does. So bearing that in mind, like, how would you kind of summarize your view about the transcendental or the metaphysical, like God? Like, which book do you think makes the most sense to you, and why?
Well, in philosophy, the central idea is know thyself. Right? Do we know ourselves? Apparently not.
No.
Because that statement suggests you don't know yourself. Right? So what is it that you know that is not what you know?
Philosophy is not innately
the
textual. Philosophy is not innately textual. It's usually upon principles, upon values, whether that's utilitarian or otherwise. Islam comes upon by things from a different angle, and I think most of the philosophy that you've come across will probably be from a Christian point of view. Would that be fair?
No, not really. I'm not. Look, let me put it to you this way. Look, if you say with apologies to look, you say, what are you looking at there? Right? I'm pointing. You see, and you say, oh, I see a tree. No, you have never seen a tree. You will never see a tree. You can never see a tree. In the same way, I'm looking at you. I'm only ever seeing a part of you, right? I'm only ever seeing a part of things, right? I don't know what the whole is. Holiness is absolutely central to religious teaching. The holy, the difference between a God and an ordinary man is that one is holy and one is divided in conflict all the time. They don't know it. We don't know that we're like that. We are divided with conflicts. And if you start imposing religion onto these things, you get all sorts of confusion.
What do you think about induction?
There aren't people there are not people, these people are very rare. A person who goes through to become holy, in my opinion, is a very rare person, right? They're unique. They're the Socrates or the Plato or the Jesus or whatever. Otherwise, why would Muhammad forego all those other teachings? Because they weren't relevant to the time. So if you look into Rumi's teaching, for example, and he says, this teaching is for these people at this time. right? So that's what I take on board.
What do you think of the processes that are used to determine what truth is in science, like induction and deduction?
Well, I think that the scientists are looking from the outside in. They're not looking from the inside out.
Well, that would be deduction, looking from the outside in.
Yeah.
Induction is when you take the samples that are in front of you and then you extrapolate a theory based
It
upon
makes
that.
a theory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, of course, based upon the success rates of science and based upon, the observations that we have of what's around us, surely there are certain things that we have done, like certain laws that we have articulated, which have been consistent.
Yeah.
For example, mathematics, 1 + 1 is 2, regardless as to whatever country you're in.
Well, 1 + 1 of what?
Just 1 + 1, a mathematical one, the number one.
When you apply it to one man and one other man, will you ever get it equal to?
Or even let's just say unit. I'm thinking more from a mathematical sense as opposed to it being implemented in, say, organisms.
Applying it, that you're applying.
Yeah. So if we just take it from the unit aspects of things, like 1 unit, add 1 unit equals 2 units.
Yeah, a bit worried about that one.
Yeah? How come?
Yeah, because when you say 1 unit of what? At the end of the day, how we use language in relation to numbers is that, there's 5 people over there, right? As though they are all the same in one sense. They're all human beings. You go up a level and you say, a level of abstraction, and you say, they are 5 human beings, but they're all extraordinarily different, in all sorts of ways.
What about 1 apple + 1 apple?
Even 1 apple, 1 + 1 apple.
Yeah.
No, they're not. Look at the trees. None of them are the same.
Yeah.
Anything like that. So, these are things that everyone can observe if they're interested in those sort of things. If they've the mindset. In fact, if I say to someone, "You're not seeing a tree," many of them don't think that's such an absurd thing to say. They move away from the idea. They don't want to explore it.
Do you raise that query with your boss when you take your salary then?
Why do you say that?
Because I'm sure you would accept £1 is the same as another pound.
Oh, I see. £1 is the same.
I'm talking on a practical level.
Yeah, well,
this is how we live our practical lives.
That's the use of the terminology that actually fits, right? But not in relation to people. One person is not the same as the other.
Islam is very simple.
It's what?
Islam is very simple. It's not something which you have to be a professor to understand. A person who is a stacker of shelves can understand in the same way as a person who is a doctor. It's something which when you look at the arguments which are placed in the Quran, which are given to us in the Quran by Almighty Allah, He says that either this universe has created itself, or it's nothing created it. These are impossibilities, or it's created by a creator. So something cannot be in existence and out of existence at the same time. So it cannot be the creator of itself. You understand? There's only three ways that this universe can get into existence. You in the same way the Quran says, if there was more than one God, then they would compete, they would fight. They would fight for supremacy, which is natural.
There are lots of ways of approaching the problem of humanity, right? Another one goes, the problem is to do with desire and rivalry.
No, this is not of humanity, this is of God, this is of divinity.
What?
This is of divinity.
Yeah.
He said this is not the case of humanity, it's the case of divinity.
We're not talking about tribes fighting or countries fighting, we're talking about one God and a second God, or even a third God, or more than that. They would fight for supremacy by the very nature and definition of God.
But not everyone, even in the case of Islam, there are people in Islam who have a different view of what it means to say your view?
No, there's nobody who could be classed as a Muslim who could believe in two gods.
Well then, now you see you're going off into another area, distinguishing and making distinctions that many people wouldn't accept.
No, but no Muslim.
You don't expect a Sunni to believe the same thing as a Shia.
Yeah, Sunnis and Shias both believe in one God.
So
Yeah.
selectively, why did they go their different paths?
No, paths in what sense though? Not in terms of prayer, like they both stand, they both bow, they both prostrate, they both accept in the Quran, they both go to pilgrimage to Mecca, they both give zakat, which is the obligatory charity of 2.5%.
Yeah.
They both accept that lying is wrong. They both accept that there is a paradise, a hellfire. They believe in the previous prophets. There are many things that they agree upon. It's only upon issues of ijtihads, issues of deriving leadership. Yeah, like who was the next leader after the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. But again, you can be Sunni and Shia, but you will still believe in the same Quran, which cannot be said for, say, the Hindus, can't be said for the Christians. That's why you've got the Protestant Bible, Catholic Bible. You've got one that do the Eucharist, that believe that you eat Jesus. One believe that you don't eat Jesus. One believe that the Holy Spirit comes from the Father alone. One believes that it comes from the Father and the Son combined. So those are integral theological differences, scriptural differences, which the Quran doesn't have. And that's the thing, that if something truly comes from God, and and God is saying in that book that He has taken it upon Himself to preserve it, and the Quran today is preserved, even when we look at the manuscript evidence. Like if you look at the oldest manuscript, it's in the University of Birmingham, and it's been carbon dated by the University of Oxford, and it has a 100% accuracy with the Quran that we have today. Christianity doesn't make that claim. They don't have a Bible dating to the time of Jesus and Moses. The Jews don't claim that they have the Old Testament that dates to the time of Moses. So when it comes to manuscript evidence, even when it comes to memorization of book, Muslims memorize their book from cover to cover. So even if all the holy books were burnt, then the Quran is the only one that can be written word for word. So there are fundamental differences, and you're absolutely right to point out that there are certain religions in which they have fundamental differences with regards to very key things. But Islam is not one of those.
Yes, I mean, obviously the obvious question would be, how come Muhammad rejected all those previous religions?
Yeah, so what we believe is that Muhammad, peace be upon him, didn't reject the essence of the teachings. The essence of the teachings of the previous prophets were, number one, believing in one God, as we know in Ezekiel, and even in the New Testament itself, in John 17:3, where Jesus makes it very clear, the only true God is the Father. And then he makes a distinction of himself, and then the Son who he sent. So we believe that there is monotheism. Jesus never said that he was God explicitly, clearly. However, this was something that was superimposed by the church fathers afterwards. In fact, Council of Nicaea came 300 years after the death of Jesus, and they decided that no, there are three co-equal, co-eternal beings. The three are three, but they are actually one. Jesus never said that. There's no definition of Trinity in the Bible. There's no explanation of that. Jesus makes it very clear. I am going to pray to my God and to your God. Moses said exactly the same thing, that he prays to only one God. And in fact, even in the Bible it says that sacrificing for a god is something that is a pagan ritual. That again is in the Old Testament, but yet Christians will tell us that no, God needs a blood sacrifice to forgive your sins. But this is something that we don't believe in. We don't believe that this was something that was preached by the prophets either. We believe Jesus hasn't been killed. So when the Prophet, peace be upon him, came, he mentioned about Moses, he mentioned about Jesus. Whilst the Bible says that Jesus became a curse and the God of the world is Satan, we say no. We make it very clear that Jesus was a blessing. His mother Mary, she indeed was the mother of Jesus. Jesus was not God. He was a prophet sent by God. Moses was a prophet sent by God. Whilst the Bible would say stuff like Lot. Lot had sex with his own daughters. The daughters got him drunk. King David liked a woman and then had adultery with her. Solomon, and the likes. We say Solomon was a prophet, David was a prophet, Lot was a prophet. They were all blessed individuals. They were righteous. They were truthful. We don't believe that they had sex with their daughters and they committed.
They were holy.
Sorry?
Holy is the essence.
They were holy, exactly.
Now,
So we believe that, yeah.
How do you become holy?
So how you become holy is by obeying Allah as shown by the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, the Prophet of the time.
Show me an example of someone who's holy.
But the example, I would say I'm holy.
Sorry?
I would say that. But then my other thing to you would be that, of course I'm holy, but I would also say that don't conflate the adherent of the religion to the religion itself. Just like...
no, because they're selective in what they choose as to be important.
It's because we believe that the religion itself is unadulterated, it's the primordial form of guidance, perfect, but human beings are imperfect, and human beings have been created imperfect, and they are being tested, and they are to live their lives, and they are and can be pulled in different directions, in positions of love, in position of power, in positions of laziness, like some psychologists say.
Let me give you a metaphor, right?
Yeah.
So, from how many different ways do you think you could look at that tree and notice difference?
In essence or in attributes?
Just from the outside.
In terms of essence, there's one way that you can see it as a tree, but in terms of attributes, there's many ways, yes.
Yeah. And you can keep looking in different ways all the time, and depending on your state as well. Your state is changing all the time.
Yes.
Right? So, with taking all those contexts in mind, who has the truth exactly?
I mean, even if you look philosophically, and Plato believed that, I'm not saying that this is what I believe, I'm saying that philosophers believed, like Plato, that there's a realm of forms. Yes. Yeah, that there is a form from which everything is compared to, that it emerges. Yeah. So we believe a tree from its basic kind of, its essence. Like, does it have roots? Does it have a trunk? Are there branches? If that's the case, then we are most likely going to accept that it's a tree. If there's a tree without roots, then it's not necessarily a tree.
But what I'm saying, as I said earlier on, is that we don't actually know what a tree is. We never see inside a tree or how it's moving or...
Right, yes.
Unless you go into a great deal of depth.
Yes.
Anyway, the long and the short of it is, there are... These holy people are very rare.
What do you think about me being a holy person?
I don't know. I wouldn't make that judgment. I don't know. I don't know. I doubt it very much, though.
Why?
Because they're such a rare phenomenon.
Well, I could be that rare phenomenon.
You could be a rare phenomenon. You could be.
And this could be your opportunity to get holiness from me.
Very good. I like it. I'm holding on anyway.
I can help you fill that hole that you have. Because you're holy in the other sense.
It'll come when it comes, and that's not up to me.
No, but think about it. What if we were to extrapolate this? Maybe this is one of those chances, those rare opportunities that maybe you might be able to resonate at a certain frequency that maybe you're not used to. Because like you said, you haven't spoken to me before, we haven't interacted before. Could be that opportunity. How do you know? How would you know?
The philosophers have become very famous through the conclusions they reached to. They would not have gone to this position of prominence by wallowing in these theories, and I studied philosophy as well, and then never coming to a conclusion on any of these grounds.
Quite right.
So, if they'd all been agnostic, not only agnostic but on every field, you understand the point?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because there's so many different ways of looking at things.
But bear in mind, don't conflate the essence with the attributes. Like in terms of essence, if someone was to come and say you're a human being, and you say, well, there's so many, I could see him in a different angle and this and that, that would be detrimental to existence and cohesion. If someone now doesn't see you as a human being, they're now dehumanizing you, which makes it easier to harm you. So it's very important that our society, hence why, has given human rights. and animals, different animal rights. Plants, different plant. Well, I don't know if plants really have rights, but
Did you ever see the rights of the chicken and the way it's treated?
well, exactly. And different countries
And the
will.
consequences for those people eating the chicken.
Yes, but if that's
Yeah.
if that's your criteria, then you need to look at the way of life which protects the rights of that chicken best. And Islam.
You have to accept that a chicken is a chicken.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if you're saying it could be seen in different ways, then technically the chicken's not really being harmed. It could be a rhinoceros.
It could be poultry neutral.
Right.
Do you see? So there are, I think the point that I'm saying is that, and I think the brother made a very fantastic point, which is that in our daily life, there are certain things that we take using a scientific principle, which is the inference to the best explanation. It's a process called induction, that we may not know something 100% and completely, but the inference to the best explanation is the case. For example, you existing. You can say it's possible I don't exist and this and that, but there are certain ways that we can safely conclude that you do exist. You coming to the park, you stopped at a red light. You waited for the green man. Hopefully, you didn't jump in front of a car. Because if you were to jump in front of a car saying I may exist, I may not exist, I may be a human, I may be a rhinoceros, it may be a different form, things can, maybe that driver sees me in a different way. No, the driver sees you as a human being, I certainly hope so. I see you as a human being, a nice man, might I add, that's why I approached you as well. And, for yourself, seeing the holy man that's standing in front of you as well. So there are certain ways that we can identify things via their essence. Indeed, you're absolutely right. There are now the attributes of those certain things. Now, how do you treat those things? How do you treat a chicken? How do you treat a human being? Oh, the human being needs to be treated like this or like that. But in essence, my friend, you exist. You are a dependent being. You depend upon something else that depends on something else. That's a fact. That's a reality. It's a reality that can be measured in modal logic, it can be measured in philosophy. You are a dependent being, according to Leibniz, according to Aristotle, according to Hegel. And then, as a consequence of you being dependent on something else, either there's now two options. Either there's an infinite regress, or there is an end to that chain. And we know rationally and logically an infinite regress doesn't exist. There's no evidence of an infinite regress. So it follows that there has to be a necessary existence. And that's why Professor John Lennox concluded, and he said that when you look at all of these philosophers that we have, whether it's Aristotle, Plato, Leibniz, Berkeley, all of these dons, all of them say, there was a transcendental entity at the end of this chain. But the debate now is, what is the nature of that entity? We don't deny that there is an entity. Yeah. So there is a necessary existence. Now the question should be, what is the nature of this existence? Is it a singular as opposed to a plural? Well, we'd say logically and rationally it has to be a singular, because if there is an end to that chain, end implies a singular rather than a plural. And then when you look at knowledge, there is knowledge in this world. Yeah, an immense amount of knowledge. So if we are dependent upon a necessary existence, that necessary existence must also have an immense amount of knowledge. There is power. Power gets its power from that which it depends upon. Therefore, the necessary existence also has an immeasurable amount of power. My friend, that is pretty much our definition of God. In chapter 112, we believe God is one, independent, does not beget, nor is he begotten, and there's none like him. So that's very simple. We don't believe God was a man. We don't believe it was a tree, even though a tree can be seen in multiple different ways, multiple different trees or multiple different human beings. So these are things that they call them necessary truths, things that can be reached using modal logic. And because modal logic uses three: a necessary existence, contingent existence, and an impossible existence. So that's why fundamentally the philosophers had no issue believing in a necessary existence. The question now was that which scripture and what would be the nature of God. Like Spinoza had a different understanding and conception of God to, for example, Descartes. to, for example, Thomas Aquinas, to say, for example, Ibn Sina. So that's where I think the crux of the debate or the discussion rests, and that's where the Quran says, produce your proof if you are truthful. The Quran actually invites discussions, and the Quran says that had it been from other than God, in it you would find many contradictions in it. And that's why if you pick up the Quran, it's consistent, it's accurate in its language. Even in terms of manuscript evidence, it's something that can be measured. But the Bible, on the other hand, the Vedas, on the other hand, they cannot. They're inconsistent. The basic fundamental, one of the fundamental laws of logic is a law of non-contradiction. Yeah, but they believe Jesus to be someone that is someone who's limited in knowledge. But they believe God is all-knowing. But they believe Jesus is both God and both man. So he holds these contradictory principles, which again doesn't make any sense.
Let me give you an example.
Of course.
We're here together. You're sensorily input. You're telling me I'm here.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Now, if you listen, for example, widely, you hear all that noise?
Yes.
Massive amount of noise. That's the context in which we're having a conversation, right? That is all-knowing in a sense. From this, the point of view of if you stop and you go silent inside, you'll hear all these noises, right? They're all there all the time, but we're not aware of them, right? So we're not aware of the larger aspect of ourselves. We're mostly focused on language which represents things serially, right? So you can't represent the immediacy of now. What's going on?
We are able to, but we are able to tune in and out, even within the limited being that we are, limited body and faculties. As miraculous as they are, they have deficiencies. But one feature of them is that Allah has given us the ability to listen to that voice or listen to that one more strongly and not listen to another. You understand? So we are listening to all
that
these.
Presupposes a certain state in the individual, and the problem is that very few people pay much attention to their biology in the sense of biochemistry that underpins all this stuff.
Do you believe in a God? Can I just understand? Do you believe in a God?
I could say yes, I did. Just for convenience, I could say yes, I do believe in God. Yeah. That's not anywhere near like what I'm interested in.
You can just say I'm not sure if you're not sure.
No,
but just for clarity.
I'm more about going on to the I don't know. I don't know myself, so that's what I'm about.
So you do know. There has to be an energy. There has to be a consciousness. There has to be a force.
You have to be, and
there's something there, but we're going to discuss about what the nature of that is.
And the most important thing is to be present.
That's us.
And by and large, we're not present.
That's fine. But I just want to.
But the Quran says something along the lines of that if you don't know God, then God will make you forget yourselves. In other words, there's a chain of command, there's a tartib, there's an order that must be followed. Like in order for you to know yourself, you must know where you come from. If someone puts a bag on your head, God forbid, someone puts a bag on your head, puts you in a train, and then takes the bag off your head, what's going to be the first question you ask?
No, the point about that is that the information about who we are is given to us. We're told who we are.
But just to follow this,
your name is John, Fred, or whatever it is. That's who you're told you are. And all the influences that come about through parental teaching and so on, whether some parents are kind and loving, whether some parents are violent and whatever else, they're all, and whether our if you like, our essence is damaged by, the expression of the essence is damaged by the state of the organism, etc., etc. I mean,
I get what you're saying. You're saying there's an intricate balance of the nature and nurture argument, and both are very important. But what I'm saying is that if someone put a bag on your head today, God forbid, and takes you on a perilous journey, and then you wake up in a day and you're on a train, what would be the first question you ask yourself?
Where am I?
Where am I? Yeah? And then what would be
words, I want to know where I am and my presence in relation to the environment that I know.
And what would be the second question you ask yourself?
Well, how did I get here? How do I get from where I am to where I want to be?
And what else?
Well, that's the question. Where I want to be.
Where I want to be, and also who put me here as well, right?
No, to be is the very essence of the problem. I'm not present to my existence, right? And that's how one must. That's where one's attention must. Our life is a series of attentions to things.
Are you saying that's a fourth question? Do I exist?
Pardon?
What's the extra question?
The question is, who am I in the way I'm relating to the world?
No, you already knew that before you got on the train.
You don't know that.
You knew that before.
You've got an idea. Someone else is telling you who you are.
So you need, for all these questions.
There's a little voice inside saying you're David or John or Fred or whatever it is, with all the connections that go with that. And they're random, they're accidental, if you like. They're things that happen to us, if you like.
But you would never find definite answers for these questions with that back into the context.
No,
now we're living,
unless
you have the one who is knowing of everything.
No, you may get
Giving
freedom from some falsehoods that you've built, you've come across early in your life. You've got wrong ideas about people and so on. Very easy to have.
Yes, if you're trying to find out, if you're trying to find out those answers by yourself, that's not going to work. So then you need to, because we don't know everything. You know hardly anything. So we need the answer from the one who knows everything and is powerful to do with everything.
Yeah, that's a good point, and that's why I agree with you when you say that we do need to make an effort of being silent and silencing the noise that's around us. But ultimately speaking, once you've silenced the noise that's around you, and ultimately when you honed in on the faculties that you have, and you know the basics of yourself, what you're doing here, what's around you, ultimately the question now is, who's put me here? Why am I here? Just like the same questions you're asked on the train. And that's the fundamental aspect of life, and that's what transcends the kind of what's being told to you in this world, because that is the knowledge that's coming from the Creator, as opposed to the created, which you're right. What comes from the created can be falsified, can be manipulated, but what comes from the transcendent one cannot be manipulated, cannot be changed. So ultimately that's the goal, my friend. Like it's knowing yourself, then what?
Let me give you an example of an expression of wholeness, if you like, as I experienced.
Yeah.
I was playing golf with my dad, right? And suddenly, all I can say is, I don't say that I did it. It happened. It was the most amazing shot I ever hit. Why? Because it was so easy, and it went straight at the die, and everything was right about it. But more to the point, it was the way it happened.
What is that?
The way it happened.
You were playing what?
Golf.
Golf. Okay.
So I spent the rest of the time trying to find out how to do that again.
To do that, yeah.
I had a clue. I didn't know that I didn't know. Right? So I'm looking at that and the realization that another dimension exists that is way, way beyond this exact, right? I believe that. I mean, not alone I believe it. It is a reality around me, and it's reinforced every day.
But here's the thing, even when we look at the most intelligent minds that came, and we look at the nature of what we have today, there's something called the principle of sufficient reason.
Of what?
The principle of sufficient reason.
Right.
Which in essence means that every cause has an effect. Yeah?
Well,
and
that question of causality is a bit up for grabs. Some people would say that's up for grabs,
Yeah, but the principle of sufficient reason is so fundamental and so integral that without it, we simply cannot do science. We simply cannot understand anything about what's around us. So for us to even, do the logical tasks that we do on a day-to-day basis, for example, switching on a kettle, making sure it's plugged in, putting water in there, and then knowing that after a minute, the water should be boiled, putting a tea bag in there will then turn it into a dark coffee, then putting milk in there will make it into a milk tea, putting a teaspoon of sugar. So there is an immense amount of cause and effect that we do not only take for granted, but we accept with blind faith.
Okay, let's look inside, right?
Yes.
So the breathing is going on. There's a certain relationship to whatever else is happening.
Yes.
Right? The blood is circulating in the body. a whole load of processes are going on simultaneously. There is no serial type of knowledge that's going to be able to record all those things, right? You'd have to have multiple computers probably to be able to manage that situation. And then the biochemical, the biochemistry, the interactions that take, what, many 45 or 46 different types of chemicals all interacting. Huge. So there's no serial, it's not to do with serial.
But here's the thing, I would use your own argument kind of against you in that regard by saying that you're seeing it from a human-centric point of view. According to your understanding, you'll see that there's so many things going on, and according to your understanding, your mental capabilities, it's so much. I can't keep tabs with it. It's too difficult. However, having a being that's created this knows how our machinery and how we function more better than us, and to him, this is all very simple and very easy.
Well, no, that's you see, you're imposing that idea onto this him that you don't know, right? So, given that that's the case, all you can say is I don't know. The things I don't know how it works. It's an incredible, absolutely, there's nothing like it. Right? Unique. Right? All those trees even are unique. Everyone is different.
Yes.
Right? Every human being is different in different ways. When you start looking into it, wow, amazing, absolutely amazing.
Do you believe there is consistency within the creation, right? You don't believe it's all inconsistent and random?
No, I mean, you could, if you have that point of view, you can take out particular examples that show that, well, yes, we know how to do it. Boil a kettle and see when it's done and da-da-da-da. Yeah, I could do all that.
No, I mean simple things like copper conducting electricity, or the sun rising, or water having a boiling point, stuff like that. Because for us to...
All those things happen within a certain context. Change the context and it's different.
But there's a consistency for us to do science, right?
Yeah, I mean...
Otherwise, then the life becomes absurd. Like Einstein said, the most incomprehensible thing about the universe is the fact that it's comprehensible. And that's the big question. Why? Why is it comprehensible? If something was truly chaotic, surely chaos begets chaos.
I'm not saying that it's chaotic. I'm saying I don't know how the structure of it works. I don't know that.
And that's absolutely fine. You don't have to know how a structure works. But for example, you don't need to know how to play the drums to know that that's a drum kit.
If you don't know how the car works, and you
yeah, I don't know how the car works.
And you put water in where the petrol should go.
No, but that's the thing. I don't know how a car works, but I know where to put the petrol.
You know a little bit about it, right?
Basics.
So similarly, I know a little bit.
If I lift
bit about the
yeah,
body, yeah.
If I lift the thing at the front, the car bonnet, struggling even with that.
All I can say is.
Then I'm going to be clueless.
All I can say is.
Yeah.
I've never been so happy in my life.
Oh, is it because you're speaking to me?
No.
Oh, you made me happy there.
No.
You're speaking to the Holy One.
And the way I see that is because of challenging the assumptions that I'd acquired wrongly, wrong assumptions about the nature of my relationship to people, and that's by examining all those things in yourself. You find that. You might find that.
Absolutely.
I don't know about that's entirely up to you.
I mean, you saw from our discussion, I'm open to that as well, and I'm well aware of the tools that need to kind of examine what's around us and the possibility of the conclusions that one can reach. But the inference to the best explanation is that there is order as opposed to chaos. There is meaning as opposed to meaninglessness. There is design, and design, as we know, relies upon a designer. For example, anywhere that you see information requires an information giver. Information doesn't just come out of nowhere. We don't believe in randomness when it comes to fundamental things, and look how much we have flourished, and look at how much we continue to flourish, and maybe we will in the future. I mean, if we start learning how
Unless we
to.
blow ourselves up in the meantime.
Well, yeah, that's what it looks like at the moment. Yeah, unfortunately, and that maybe we can do it from Mars with the thin atmosphere and the rustic nature of Mars offers.
I don't know anything about that.
Yeah. So, in that regard, I think you're right, and I think there's some that you can kind of look into a bit more, because we do go about our lives understanding and with a lot of beliefs. Like, you believe that the sun will rise tomorrow. You have no evidence that the sun will rise tomorrow. No evidence whatsoever.
Very little about that.
Yeah. It's the most scientists will say is it's happened in the past, therefore it will happen tomorrow.
Yeah.
But you're just relating to the past. You're not giving any evidence that it must happen tomorrow. And maybe tomorrow's the day it's not going to happen. So bearing all that in mind, when we understand and we look around us, information begets an information giver. Begets is not a good word, but information relies upon an information giver. And even when you look at logic and rationality, it's singular, has to be someone that's knowledgeable. And surely if the dependent beings are dependent upon the necessary existence, then that is a solution to the question that you said, which is that we need knowledge. We need knowledge that's independent of these corrupt beings that are, going about the world trying to get and amass as much power and control as they want. And the only way to do that is by referring to a transcendental being, someone that transcends all of this. Surely the solution, like some people say, we're not really happy with democracy, but we have to be a part of it. Some people are of the opinion that for you to come up with another system, you shouldn't necessarily be in that system. Plato had big qualms with democracy. He wasn't happy with it at all. Neither was Nietzsche. So, bearing all of this in mind, would you say that the inference to the best explanation is a creator? And if you are given rational arguments pertaining the creator, as opposed to things just happening, just falling into place, which requires an immense amount of belief and has very little evidence, in fact. You know what I mean? It's, Terence McKenna made a very good point, and Rupert Sheldrake said, Terence McKenna said that the atheists claim that give us one free miracle and we'll explain the rest. And that one free miracle is that matter and antimatter and organisms all came by chance. And once we allow them this, then we'll explain the rest. We'll tell you how organisms then evolved, and we'll tell you all of this. But grant us the initial miracle that things come from nothing and then they form by chance, and they continue doing so, such that a fish becomes a lizard, becomes a mouse, becomes an ape, and eventually the common ancestor of man, which is an immense amount of belief. Like from a fish to a man. Imagine going to a child and say, you were once upon a time a fish. And a child goes, the most ludicrous thing I've ever heard. Well, I've got the evidence. Did you see the evidence? No. This is belief then. And that's why you've got a Nobel Prize winner, Eugene Wigner, also saying that, how does mathematics work in science? This is we take it on belief. We just don't know. So when you hear all of this from the Holy One himself, what comes to your mind? Genuinely.
Nothing. The larger context.
But haven't I explained to you the larger context?
This all-knowing going on at the moment.
Being
in that state. You have to be present to know that. And the problem is, our real problem is we're not present. Right?
You're right. Present is important, but being present and then connected to the divine, that then follows. Merely being present is futile if you're not connected with the divine, because then
you may not have gone far enough.
Oh, the Holy One has.
No, the Holy One may have gone.
You gotta be connected.
With respect.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm following what you're saying. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Great, absolutely great. I'm great that you found it, Absolutely. I'm quite happy with where I am, to be honest. As I said, I've never been so happy, right? And it's essentially through seeing the wrong assumptions, the wrong beliefs that I had about the nature of things, about the nature of my way of relating. And you can only see that by being in the present and examining, what is it that Socrates says? The unexamined life is not worth living. There you go. That's
You mentioned happiness. What's happiness? Because the Americans say the pursuit of happiness. They don't say happiness.
If I say happiness, then you'd have some other interpretation.
Don't say any naughty things though, yeah? Your kids, or maybe.
No.
Because that's pleasure. That's why I want to see what you say.
Yeah, because you can become attached. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Underrated.
Because we can become attached to even the teaching can be a destructive thing.
What do you think is happiness though?
Just being.
Being.
You see, the point is, the realization is that if you look into discovering what happens when you start to be present to what's going on in your musculature, that we're holding on to tensions all the time. Massive amount of energy goes down the toilet.
Yeah.
Because we're badly set up, right? The energy is wasted. We're wasting it all the time. We don't know. So therefore, we don't have. You've got the idea in Vedanta, for example, of the idea of that if you were still and moving in that direction, that you'd start to.
Isn't that a contradiction though? You can't be still and moving in a.
No, I realize that. No. The thing is, the stillness. But how can you recognize that it happens? Something happens that is. Well, you're connected to the idea of the outcome of releasing what's taking place.
I released something today, but I flushed it down the toilet.
You can free but you're freeing yourself from those tensions.
Yeah.
Right. That and that they keep coming back because they're part of a pattern, and there are patterns within patterns and so on. You've got to look into it, discover what's there.
So how would you distill your definition? I mean, I understood you to say happiness is being, i.e. just existing, but according to that, everyone's happy then.
No, they're not because they're not present. That's the
How would you know though?
They think they're not. They think they're. Well, if you go with people.
But aren't you judging based upon the external when you don't know what's on the internal?
Well, no, it's fairly. Look, it's like people going along and they're looking at their phone and they're going to cross the road without. Have you ever seen that happening?
I have, yeah.
I mean, you wouldn't believe what takes place. Well, you do.
Yeah.
I'm making a joke of it, but actually it's not a joke at all.
Yeah.
And the point is, if you're in the same situation where you've got something in your head that's going on, and you're not present to what's going to yourself.
But here's the argument that Thomas Nagel made, and he wrote a paper on this. It was a good paper, and the title was, if I was to paraphrase it, he said, human beings can never know how bats experience life.
No.
So it's the same with us as well.
Yeah, you can't know. You can't know what other people are experiencing.
Exactly.
Because they're experiencing through a whole patterns of difference and all.
So bearing that in mind now, so how would you then be able to extrapolate that X amount or X person is not present? You're assuming based upon their behavior, you don't know how they're experiencing that existence. Maybe they have.
I'm guessing that the film that they're watching is what they're watching.
Like, I'll give you an example. There are certain people, they're disabled, and if they go out, it's very difficult for them to zone out from what's going on, and they start screaming. I forget what disability they have.
Yeah.
So they have to put on a headphone, and they put on the camera feature,
Yeah.
and they watch the world through the phone, and that relaxes them, and that makes them more kind of. So that person, wouldn't you say that they are present, or an artist that's like, let's just say you and I, we might see this landscape over here, but I would argue a artist that's painting the landscape, he is or she is more cognizant of the details right in the background that you and I would probably ignore. I would argue they are more present. There's somebody standing here staring and their mind is wandering off somewhere. So you're basing things upon your observation and your understanding. Sometimes certain people will be in a conversation like you've told me that
The things I don't understand.
Yes. Like sometimes you'll be speaking to somebody for about 10 minutes, but they're thinking about, the nice food that they're going to enjoy when they go home, and you ask them about what you've said. They said, sorry, I was miles away. But you weren't, though. You were looking at me. You were conscious. Every now and then you gave me the social cues, the micro expressions that you were paying attention.
Yeah.
But you weren't. So I would say the similar thing, that if you are saying that happiness is merely being present, many people here may be present, but you would never know that, though. So how would you know your form of presence?
No, it's not. It's not
Yeah.
my form of presence. They're unique. They're having their own experience.
There you go.
But they will be able to tell you whether they were present or not. Oh God, I didn't notice that car. And,
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, or whatever. Or they bang into someone. They're watching a film on the thing.
Yeah, they are.
And
Yeah.
they're wondering why they're banging into people. You know what I mean?
But what do you think of somebody that's maybe watching a documentary on something which is maybe outside of our planet Earth, maybe talking about space, maybe talking about the things that
Cosmology,
are cosmological documentary. So that person, I would argue, is more present than somebody that's just worried about who's bumping into them on the road. Do you see? So even when it comes to being present, that's why I'm saying that when you go down this path.
Well, the relevance to what you have to be relevant to your situation. If you're going down the road like this, and you're thinking about space, and there's a car going to hit you from the right.
Yeah, that space.
You're
Yeah.
not really present to the reality.
Hey,
of the situation.
I'm inclined to agree with you, but here's the thing, my friend. Well, what I'm trying to say is that when we the questions have no end, and that's the nature of philosophy. Philosophy will question all sorts of things, like you could be in a matrix, you could be a brain in a vat, you could be in a simulation, you could be in a computer program, and frankly, you can't debunk that. Eventually, philosophy will lead you to insanity. Why? Because there is no what do you call it? What do you call those metal things that keep the ships in place? Anchor. Yeah, you don't have any anchor in life, and if you don't,
It's that relationship between knowledge and being. Absolutely essential.
but surely knowledge is something which is never ending. Like the more a person learns, the less they know, and eventually, I mean, how would a person go about living their life if they don't even accept the fact that they're a human being, or the fact that they even having an experience, or the fact that they're even happy or not? You do have to.
A child is happy as it is, by and large, provided that they're treated properly, halfway to decent, they're fed and so on and so forth. They're happy, delighted to go around. If you watch them, they're so full of delight.
If you watch them, from your understanding, you deem them to be happy.
Yeah, I'd call that happiness.
Do you see?
Yeah.
But according to Thomas Nagel, I'll give you an example. They said one person at 5 o'clock in the morning, he was going somewhere and someone was returning from somewhere. The person going was going to the mosque. Yeah, and he assumed that the other person was returning from the mosque. However, the person that was coming, he'd come from a nightclub. So he'd been coming from a nightclub and he assumed that the other person was going to a nightclub. So we base things upon our subjective experience. We think that, this child looks happy. For example, even animals, they look like they're in pain, but it's merely a defense mechanism to ward off predators. It looks to a human being they're in immense amount of pain, but they're actually not. Chimpanzees, they have this defense. They actually get very high pitched and very aggressive, but that's their defense mechanism. There's another animal as well. It's a bird. The bird actually looks like it's waddling, but it's actually okay. When the predator goes, it's normal again and it flies off. So that's what I'm saying, that don't be restricted to the human aspect, because even the human aspect, you're going to be walking the street thinking, I don't hear anything. But there's like 5 dog whistles going on, but just because you don't hear it, it's not within your hearing range, doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Even the seeing, the bat, The example of the bat is good because it relies upon an echolocator system. It sees things without eyes.
Yeah, no, sure.
Yeah, and its experience is completely different.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
Similarly with a child, like it's more like I would equate a child. I mean, I hope the viewers don't get upset, but like a dog. Yeah, reason being because dogs don't necessarily understand the language; they go with the tone. Like you can go to a dog, yo, piece of crap, and then you go, I love you. That dog, they've done experiments in which they've seen that even if you're saying I love you, but you're doing it in an aggressive way, a dog will get very, like why is master angry with me?
Tail will go down.
Yeah, exactly. Same with a child. I can say to my child, hey, you were a mistake. Yeah, you were. And the child's gonna be like, ah, gaga. But then, do you see? So that's something that we understand. In fact, there are certain psychologists that say you can even map what children say, and you can find that there is a level of communication from even the gagas and the gugus. They have their own language.
Yeah.
Plants communicate with each other, whilst
Obviously, in one state they'll be behaving in one way, in another state they'll be behaving in another way.
Yeah.
No problem.
So guess what I'm saying? What I'm saying is that don't be duped by your sensory experience. Don't rely solely upon your sensory experience.
If you follow my tree example, you
Yeah.
realize that that's not the case.
But the fact that you say it's a tree, and all of these are trees, you wouldn't call this a tree, would you? Yeah. So so you do distinguish between the
You
essence.
could use tree metaphorically,
Yeah. Of course you can. Yeah.
and that's what, of course, one of the problems of religious teachings is that to know the difference between the metaphor and what is being
The Bible. That's the issue with the Bible. Why? Because they don't have a chain of narration and they don't have a scholarly tradition which can be measured by an external observer. We as Muslims, we have something called a chain of narration. So if I give a quote and I say the Prophet, peace be upon him, said something, I can give you I can tell you who I got it from, who they got it from, leading all the way to the Prophet. I can tell you the name, family or tribe of every person in that chain. So in other words, someone can't come along and say, oh, the Prophet said X, the Prophet said Y. That's an issue that a lot of people are having today. You'll see a picture of Aristotle saying and giving a quote, and people believe Aristotle. It's okay, no problem.
Is that yours?
Yes, mine, yeah. No, it's okay. So with Aristotle, I mean, with Socrates, people say it's we don't know. There's no surviving literature of Socrates. We have to take Plato's word for it, and even Plato's literature, there's no chain of narration. There's no way that an external observer can measure if that book is actually authentic or not. But Islamically, I would argue, and I absolutely sympathize with what you say as well, that there does need to be a measurable way that scripture and even metaphors and stuff like this, interpretations, can be measured. Otherwise, you're absolutely right. It is a subjective thing, and someone can come along. They want to, like Henry VIII, he wants to divorce a person, and then he says, I'm going to create a church and I'm going to make this thing. And yeah, you're absolutely right. And this is a threat. And I'm glad you brought this up. And that's why I wanted to make the distinction between the Quran and the Bible, that regardless of what sect you are, Muslims have memorized the Quran from cover to cover. If all the holy books were burnt,
Some.
Yeah. So I'll give you an example that
You don't think they're all the same, do you?
Muslims.
Everyone knows the amount the same exactly.
No, that's a Freudian slip. So what I mean by the tradition of the Quran being memorized is something which is prevalent amongst Muslims, to couch my language more precisely. And if all the holy scriptures were burnt, the Quran is the only one that can be written word for word, which means that it's not at the mercy of people and their nefarious intentions and desires.
Even the words are relevant to a particular time. Just like Rumi said, his teaching was for those people at that time. In other words, it wasn't for them forever and a day. Because imagine you come along and you meet a certain number of people, right, and you see they're all at a different level, maybe. Their ability to understand the teaching and so on, very, very different. In other words, in order to even discuss some of the things presupposes a certain background knowledge, right? If you didn't have that, you wouldn't be able to do it. So how many people are that interested? You're interested, I'm interested. That's where moving at that level where we're both interested in the subject. So, but that's not everything you have to realize.
You're okay. Yeah. You're right, but you're also wrong in the sense that there are certain things that are non-time specific. For example, not hurting people, yeah, giving charity, helping those less fortunate, being respectful to your parents. So these are things, regardless of whether it was 1400 years ago, whether it's now. I would argue that these are certain, certain things that don't change. However, clothing is something that does change. Language, you're right, does change, and these are things that do need a scholarly preservation. Yeah, not even scholarly approach. We believe that even what the scholars have said, there is a chain of narration. Like, let's just say Imam Abu Hanifa said something, yeah, who's a scholar, who's a classical scholar of Islam, and if he has said something, we need to know, for example, we get it from Imam Abu Hanifa. Imam Abu Hanifa got it from his teacher Hamad. Yeah, Hamad got it from Ibrahim al-Naqai. Ibrahim al-Naqai got it from Alqama. Alqama got it from Abdullah bin Mas'ud. Abdullah bin Mas'ud got it from the Prophet Muhammad. So I've just given you a chain of narration, and this chain of narration is connecting these generations 1400 years down the line, and shows, and you're absolutely right, because somebody can come along, as they've done with the Bible, saying, oh, Jesus, he said over here this thing, but he actually meant this thing. And like, I'll give you an example, like the example of Jesus saying, no one knows the hour but the Father. Somebody may come along and say, oh, but no, he didn't mean this, he actually meant that, this is another aspect of knowledge. But if you look at the church fathers like Athanasius and Irenaeus, they said, no, Jesus didn't know the hour, that's it. But when you go to a Christian and someone that's a bit more learned, they say, yes, you're right, that's true. But the average layman who doesn't have access to true scholarship, they will struggle. But
maybe I'm not even interested in it.
Yeah, you're right. But Christianity doesn't have chains of narration. Like church fathers, we just have to accept that certain people have the Holy Spirit and certain people don't. It's not stuff that can be measured. And that's, I guess, what I'm saying, that even when it comes to happiness and even when it comes to experience, there have to be things that can be measured objectively. And if they're measured objectively, then we can get to what is true, what is not true. Otherwise, we're just in limbo. Anyone can say anything. A man can say he's a woman can say he's a pineapple, and we have to be okay with it just because they feel a certain way. And that's, I think, where society is going, and I think we do need to have certain objective truths and measures, and we do need to take them into consideration. And there are certain things that can be reached. Whilst you're right, other things cannot be reached. Certain things are subject to change, but there are many things that are not subject to change. For example, I would argue one can rationally, logically infer that there is a necessary existence which is all knowledgeable, all powerful, that can be inferred, that does have will, power, intelligence. Yeah. And
bad outcomes from that over time. You know? We should really be allowing the body to express itself properly. You know? So I'm very into all these health aspects as well, you know, to treated health-wise. And I think people need to pay attention to that now, because of the poisons in the water, poisons in the food, it's everywhere, you know. What are people doing? What do you say to people, you know, in your community about these things? How do they deal with it?
So, from what I've noticed, there's a distinction of race and class. So people that are of a certain class, what I've noticed is that if they're of a higher class, when I say higher class, I mean not working class, yeah? So they're well off. So people that are well off, even if you take a casual trip down Waitrose, Yeah, even Waitrose is not the most ideal. It's not the best, but
Full of
just
plastic.
yeah, just for the purposes of our example, if we compare it with say Aldi and Tesco, you will see certain people that do shop in Waitrose are people that can afford it, that have that luxury. We've got like certain farmers markets in our areas down Balham. I'm not sure if you're aware of that. Certain and the carrots, they'll be purple. They'll be not a certain shape. However, you will see people going there purchasing it, even though a few carrots will set you back a good £4 or £5.
Oh, yeah.
But people are okay with doing that. Why? Because they can afford to do it.
Well, it's not really affording to do it, because I could explain that to my children or whatever, and they won't take it on. They don't take it on board.
But here's the thing that I've noticed in my humble experience is that when I was, because I used to be a primary school teacher, and one thing that I noticed when I was healthy eating, and when we would go in the kitchen with the other teachers would giggle and say, "Oh, what's the
Well,
point?"
that's the other thing. It's got social problems.
No, but here's the
They
thing.
think you're a bit weird.
Yeah, but I didn't care about that, as you can possibly imagine. And I said, look, this is fine. And in fact, like a teaspoon of sugar will suppress your immune system for 4 hours, and etc. etc. And I said that, but I would argue health and even religion, and possibly even I would say the gym as well. Eventually, your body forces you to accept those things. Now, if you're constantly having bad food, eventually you're going to have to visit Mr. Doctor, and Mr. Doctor will tell you something extreme like, you know what, if you continue down this path, you're going into an early grave. You need to stop this, you need to stop that.
That's the problem. That's not the way it goes.
It's not supposed to, yeah.
Just let me explain
Yeah.
what that is, right? The Americans spend something like 4.5 trillion the last time I looked at it. 4 point on healthcare.
Is it okay if I just clip this on here? I'll just clip it here just so I don't have to hold it. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
4.5 trillion. Of that 90% of that is spent on treatment. Right? Now, it's what type of treatment? Chronic treatment. Now, even
Pills.
children nowadays in America, 54% have chronic diseases. Right? What's a chronic disease? Diabetes is a classic example.
Yeah.
Millions and millions of people have it in America. What
Yes.
are they doing about it? They're on drugs for life.
Yeah.
That's what they're doing. And that's where the money goes, drugs for life. They don't want to cure you. They want you. Well, they're making fortunes out of everyone paying in a little bit and a little bit.
That's true, yeah.
Money. I mean, it's absolutely appalling.
It's good business.
What?
From their side, it's good business.
I understand.
Yeah.
The business point of view, but I see the people's point of view.
Yes, absolutely.
But then if you try and correct the people, they'll be coming at you with the back.
Yeah.
You're weird, you know what I mean? What have you got?
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a problem. It is a social problem.
You're right, and I think one thing that I've noticed, because I think although you can or can't tell, I've been trying to go to the gym fairly regularly, and then when you start that kind of lifestyle, then whoever's kind of guiding you or telling you to, you need X amount of protein, you need to do this, you need to look after your alcohol, your cigarettes and all of that. So that aspect, because it's on the rise, I would argue that people are paying somewhat more attention than they once did. Especially, I think we're
Some people are.
a bit more better off than say America, because even if you compare our ketchups, our drinks, our chocolate bars, there are certain American candy, like there used to be some American candy shops here, and they're being raided now. Why? Because they have illegal candy, because that candy has certain things that are banned within Europe. But I would argue also England and UK allow certain things within smart Skittles that say Germany and Norway wouldn't. So we're still behind certain European countries.
Of course, yeah.
But you're absolutely right, because we believe also, and this you're saying, how do we tell our communities this? We believe that food has a spiritual aspect. For example, knowing that a chicken has been abused, that has gone through what it's gone through. Yeah, if you then consume that chicken knowing that that chicken might be halal, i.e. sacrificed properly, but it doesn't mean it's tahir, meaning pure. So this is something that's growing. That's why there's an Oxford farm, but the thing is that they have organic chickens that they sell, but because they're pricey, and even I think Hill Farm, they actually supply. They're one of the Muslim suppliers to like Waitrose, who give like a background, the Angus beef, but again, like the average layperson struggles in our areas to kind of afford that. So
Exactly.
yeah, so bearing that in mind, according to our tradition, food has a spiritual effect on you,
Absolutely.
and that food which hasn't been sourced well will have a negative effect on you.
Impact, yeah.
And I noticed this as well, that when you have a lot of sugar and a lot of these bad foods, you'll become tired, lethargic, you won't be as active. Now, when we pray, according to the Bible, we also say that Jesus would put his head on the ground. So did Abraham, Moses, and so did the Prophet Muhammad. Now, I'm guessing here that the Muslim prayer, we get on our hands and knees and, we prostrate in front of God. Seeing somebody of your age, it doesn't seem to me that you would struggle to do that. But if I was to maybe see somebody else, I would assume that a lot of people struggle nowadays. Why? Because the joints are aching, there's arthritis, there's diabetes, they're tired, they're out of breath. Like physically, you're looking good. Yeah, you're in shape.
I work at it every day.
There you go.
I realized I had to work at it.
Yeah.
You don't. I mean, I was in hospital once for a checkup. Anyway, I noticed two people in the beds. One maybe was 45, 50. The other might have been about 60, 65. But the point about them was they were in a terrible state, right? And honestly, I see people around who are much younger than me who are in a terrible state.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And they don't know how to look after them. They never even it's not even a question.
Yeah.
And they take in the food, so-called food.
Yeah.
What can you say? It's a disaster, honestly.
It's interesting. I mean, when I got into this, I was looking into Fanta, and on the ingredients there is citric acid. Now, I'm sure you know citric acid. The first thing that comes into your head is oranges, lemons, limes. However, when you look at the citric acid that's in Fanta, it comes from industrial black mold, and that's synthesized in the lab. Now, although it's edible and it's been passed by the governments, I mean, if your mother's cooking food and she's got two options, either I use citric acid from an orange or I use industrial black mold, with all due respect, I'll go for the former.
Once you know that, but you know that.
Yeah.
Right? Now, how many people know that? Seriously.
And they're not, yeah.
Isn't the problem lack of... They're just not informed. And then
It's true.
It's not just informing them, but they have to have a value to it as well. It has to be believed and valued. And acted upon.
It's true. I believe it to be a philosophical issue.
Yeah.
A philosophical and a moral issue as well. Why? Because
why would anyone knowingly do that to other people?
Convenience.
Well, money. But
I'll give you an example. Money, convenience. Like when I would go with my mum, we'd go to Iceland and we'd buy 75p custard creams. Now, why the hell are they 75p? If they're paying for packaging, ingredients, and all of these, if I was to make custard creams at home, it'd cost me at least a $5. You know what I mean? Like it'd be more expensive making that.
Yeah.
How are they able to make it for so cheap? Because the ingredients are synthetic, cheap, terrible. Like why is it that if I buy that stuff and then leave it out in the sun, it's gonna take weeks, if not months, to disintegrate? It's ridiculous.
That's exactly the problem. Yeah.
Like between us, I try to source my milk. I don't want to incriminate myself.
No.
I'm not actually not me. Some people that I know,
Okay. All right.
they the milk that they drink is they get it from farmers directly.
Yeah.
Yeah, none of this homogenization, pasteurization, 500 processes going through this. They get it directly from the farms. But in order to do that, you're absolutely right. You need to have these connections. But here, the reason why I said philosophical and moral is because this was a distinction I found between George Orwell and Huxley. George Orwell said that things will become dystopian because governments will enforce their will upon the people. Huxley had a different point of view. Huxley said No. I believe because of comfort and luxury, people will willingly forego certain things to gain certain things of convenience. And we're seeing this a lot today as well, that people willingly are, put a chip in me. Like in Sweden, one of the first guys, I think he allowed a chip in there, in his hand, just so he can scan it and he doesn't have to use his Oyster card. Or just so he doesn't have to carry his keys with him. It really is. And I'm sure you're well aware of Black Mirror as well. I think a fantastic series. Charlie Brooker has done a fantastic job of showing how these technologies can definitely be hacked and can be used against us. And we have to maintain as much freedom as possible. Something that I could see was a common thread amongst your discussion as well, which is maintain freedom from as many controlling things as possible. Try to know yourself, try to know thyself, and trust your own experience. And then that's where I kind of added to that, and I said that experience will be multiplied and magnified and enriched by being connected to God. And that's, I think, where the crux of the argument rests. But yeah, for the average kind of discussion, you're absolutely right. People, I'm shocked. In fact, I'm shocked at how silly people are.
Exactly.
Where they're giving away their freedom. Why? Because it's convenient. Like, I'm sure you can tell me of a time in which people knew every single phone number in their address book by heart.
Yeah.
Nowadays, and I'm guilty of this myself, I only know one number, that's my own. And that's because I have to write it into forms.
Yeah.
And they ask about my number. So it's definitely a sad state of events. And you're right, food will control.
They're watching it down the road.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of things like that going on. Are they a blessing?
There's definitely a amount of control, like when you give the upbringing of your children, there needs to be certain principles that they are instilled with. For example, don't seek validation from people. Now that is so integral when it comes to social media, because some people are displaying themselves and where they're going, their travels and all of that. Why? Because they want the validation of strangers. Yeah, and that's why they have to post everything online. That's one thing. Another thing is, I have to be socially connected. I don't want to be in the presence of people. Well, that's just life. You have to, when you're in the presence of people, you take the good, you leave the bad. No one's going to give you a perfect, I can't be around too many people, autism and this. What is this? Where is this coming from? And this is, the current medical system, which is in line again with what you said, it loves to throw labels around. You're autistic, you're this, why? So carry on popping pills in order to do lifetime medicine.
I mean,
That's what,
they want to be taken out in shots of these people, honestly. And they get caught regularly.
they do.
It's not that it's something not known. It's in all the time, either the New York Times or the London, whatever. There's a report on, there's loads of reports on.
But the way they do it, I think, is clever. Like Amazon purchased the Washington Post. And the way they do it, whenever these things come, they'll report it. But again, it'll be a war of language. They'll couch the language in a certain way. And it will be in the page.
They delete information. They emphasize things that are in their interest to do so. And
Yeah.
you name it, they're up to all sorts of scams.
It will be on page 4
Yeah.
of the newspaper. And on the Google search, it'll come on page 3 somewhere. You're absolutely right. And it's
There are
good.
all sorts of lies going on.
Yeah.
And you have
And that's why the testification of faith in Islam it starts with there is no God. Like, first, for you to even come to the table is you have to accept there's no God except Allah. And then Muhammad is a messenger of God. In other words, the Quran invites people that, don't just take things on face value. Look at the Quran. Notice that if it had come from anyone other than God, in it you'd found many contradictions. But For example, when you look at the clouds, do they look heavy or light to you? What do you say? The clouds are heavy or light?
Well, they're quite light today, I'd say.
Light, yeah? But when the Quran mentions clouds, it uses the word heavy for them.
Yeah.
And if you were to Google whenever you get a chance, an average cloud weighs 500 tons.
Wow.
Yeah, 500 tons. It was shocking for me as well.
That's amazing.
Another precision of language in the Quran is whenever Allah talks about a spider spinning a web, it refers to female spiders. Now again, I was thinking, why the female? Why not the male? Upon researching a bit about this, you'll realize that it is only the female spider that spins the web.
Yeah.
So,
How interesting.
yeah, so
So in other words, you don't take it for granted. Oh, that's just a web.
yeah.
There's a lot to know.
Absolutely.
And that's where Socrates examining things, examining the way you're relating to things, vitally important. I think.
So with the spider one, God tells us such a weak house it is. What will make you realize how weak of a house it is? Now, why did Allah emphasize on this? Scholars will sit and they will do tadabbur on this, they will reflect on this. Weak house, obviously, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see a cobweb. You just take a broom and you destroy hard work of half an hour's worth of spider web making. But there's another aspect which today we're finding out, which is that when the female spins the web, in 30% of the time, it kills the male.
Why?
We're still learning, but the fact that they're a man and a woman, they're together, and then after, they are kids, the woman kills the man. Man is dead. And then they say in about 15% of cases,
Well, it can't be untrue if she does that.
well, but here's the thing, in 15%, no, that's fine. 15% of the time, this is the moral, what do they say, cosmic justice. Then the children, when they grow up, or later on the children then kill the mother.
Right.
So not only is it a weak house when it comes to the physical aspect, it's a weak house when it comes to the moral aspect of things as well.
Yeah.
So for those people that want to look into the Quran deeply, they can. For those people that don't have the time to do so, my friend, it's very simple. Like if you, and I have done this as well, even when it comes to Trinity, and I'll ask a Christian about Trinity, you cannot explain Trinity without appealing to contradictions. But when it comes to the basic depiction of God in Islam, things are very simple, very easy. There's only one God. He has no partners. He is independent. Does not beget nor is begotten. There's none like it. That's it. Simple. A man can't be God. A rhinoceros can't be God. A tree can't be God. None of that can be God. The book has to be preserved, because if it's reliant upon human beings, then it can be changed. It can be adulterated. It can be added to, taken out, which we know has happened to the Bible. The Christians don't shy away from this. So bearing all of this in mind, Islam seems the rational choice, the logical choice, and the choice that survives the most criticism. And in fact, Muslims welcome criticism.
You're doing a great job.
Thank you so much.
I have to.
No, I absolutely understand. Thank you for your time, and
Anyway, good being here with you and listening to your point of view.
thank you so much. Have a wonderful day, yeah? Let me just check, is that off? Yes, it's off. Perfect.
All right.
Okay, take care. Take care, bye. Sure.